Hey, Dr. Joy here today. Hope you're all having a great day. And I want to talk a little bit about today about a course coming up this weekend that I'm attending that I think all of you that are suffering from depression or constipation or chronic fatigue or like cold hands and feet, hair loss, inability to lose weight, and really struggling with this. Going to be some great information in this course from the Kharrazian Institute. It's a course about Hashimoto's, which is a type of thyroid disease. And if you're a clinician and you are waiting for something to come along to take your practice to the next level, I can't recommend this course enough. I think the first time I took Dr. Kharrazian's first thyroid class called Mastering Thyroid was around 2010. That was the year he also wrote this book called Why Do I Have Thyroid Symptoms Even Though My Lab Tests Are Normal. This is an amazing book. It's 10 years old, but the majority of the concepts in here are standing the test of time. And I remember when I first took this class, it basically opened up a million doors for me in practice. And here's the deal. If you're in clinical practice and you're seeing chronic conditions, having a really good grasp of what the thyroid is doing is central to their recovery. And if you're a client and you have depression or you have constipation or you have fatigue and you're losing hair and you're gaining weight or any combination of those things, and in fact, you've been told, hey, you must have a thyroid issue, and then they look at your thyroid labs and they all look normal, you're basically a great candidate for understanding a little bit more about what's going on. And so this class is not actually for practitioners only. It's for anybody that wants to register. He's going to be using technical terms. He's going to be using medical terms. Let's see what the course looks like. On Saturday, he's going to be getting into, the pathophysiology and epidemiology of Hashimoto's, which is the thyroid autoimmunity. That's the most common thyroid pattern, okay? He's going to get into the physiology of Hashimoto's. And then in the afternoon, he's going to talk into dietary, lifestyle, and nutrition interventions that can help people that have this condition, okay? The thing about that part of the course is if you're a client struggling with Hashimoto's, if you're a person out there that's just like super depressed, you know something's up, you've had the diagnosis of Hashimoto's, you've done everything you can in the standard and the alternative model, and you're looking for more information or at least some dialogue that you can have with the clinician to help you through it, or maybe some things that you could at least consider implementing lifestyle-wise, then this would be the course to check out, okay? In the afternoon, he's gonna get into hormone replacement and some of the principles relating to different types of thyroid hormone, synthetic versus bioidentical hormone, and their clinical presentation, the strengths and weaknesses and the need for those things. And this is not an alternative medicine course, okay? If you have a thyroid condition, obviously, there's not gonna be a part of this course that says, don't take your medicine and go against what your doctor's saying. That's not what this course is about. This course is about understanding the underlying physiology and determining what you can do nutritionally with lifestyle to support what you're already doing in the medical model, okay? And then on day 2, he's gonna be getting into the environmental and pathological pathogenic triggers of Hashimoto's, meaning, hey, what are some of the chemical things in the environment? What are some of the things in the infectious disease realm? Different types of viruses and gut issues and bacteria that could overgrow, that could contribute to a thyroid issue. He's going to be getting into that. And then for the clinicians in the room, he's going to be getting into how to do a comprehensive evaluation for Hashimoto specifically. And then in the afternoon on Saturday, he's going to be getting into how to manage clients with Hashimoto's specifically for clinicians. And then the last thing he's going to do is get into case studies and questions. So this course is going to be pretty amazing. And like I said, the first course that I took with Dr. Kharrazian related to thyroid basically changed my career. And I couldn't help the people I'm helping today if I hadn't had that class, because basically what does the thyroid do? Thyroid hormone is basically what determines the metabolic rate of all of our tissue. And one of the first papers in the pre-course material that he presented to us for this class was related to thyroid hormone and metabolism, and he gets into actually all of the different aspects of how does the thyroid gland actually control things like body fat? How does it control things like how we make energy? How does it control our muscle endurance? How does it control how our pancreas works so that we can have good blood sugar, and our gallbladder so we can actually absorb fat and utilize fat, okay? And then how does a gallbladder issue secondary to a thyroid issue, lead to an essential fatty acid issue, or a fat absorption issue, which can lead to like a vitamin D or vitamin A issue, which could then exacerbate thyroid autoimmunity. So you get into all these different crosstalks between systems. Okay, it's going to be pretty awesome. So I'm just going to cover a couple of things here that I learned in the first course, just really quickly, so that maybe I can get you all pumped up about this. And if you're a client out there, like I said, with depression or constipation or fatigue, if you're just fatiguing during exercise in a way that you never used to, if you're having a hard time losing that weight, hopefully some of the information I covered today is useful to you, and you can get some dialogue going with your doctors and know that there's resources out there that are covering this. Okay, so basically some of the biggest things that I took home from the first thyroid course: the majority of thyroid cases in the US are autoimmune. Okay, and that's not like an opinion, that's in the literature. The majority of cases of thyroid in the US are autoimmune. It's a condition called Hashimoto's. Now there's a more severe autoimmune condition called Graves' disease as well. And so part of what was covered in the pre-course materials was a review of the differential diagnosis of Hashimoto's and Graves' based on history and labs, which is really useful. So basically, if we understand that the primary or the most common cause of thyroid symptoms, depression, constipation, fatigue, cold hands and feet, hair loss, weight gain, things like that, if those things are secondary to an autoimmune condition, then merely doing thyroid hormone replacement, which might be absolutely necessary in that case, could completely miss the issue, okay, which is a autoimmune condition attacking the thyroid gland. Now, if that goes on severely and long enough, what will happen is the gland will fail and thyroid hormone replacement will definitely be indicated. It can lead to a primary hypothyroidism, okay, which is a failure of the thyroid gland. However, if there is autoimmunity, then one of the nastiest things about it is it can actually start affecting other tissue. So there's going to be some information covered in this course about how the thyroid can lead to things like encephalitis, which is swelling in the brain. Did you know that people with thyroid autoimmunity often suffer from vertigo? They suffer from anxiety and depression, which could stem from a crosstalk between the brain and the antibodies that the immune system makes against the thyroid gland. So he's going to be covering that in detail. And also there's an interesting paper talking about how people with thyroid issues may be susceptible to certain types of cancers as well. So that's all in there. It's going to be covered. What I like to cover a little bit about is just a basic diagram discussing thyroid hormone physiology, some of the different patterns, and then two main concepts that blew my mind and kind of blew the doors off how I managed thyroid in my practice prior to that seminar until afterwards. Okay, so basically in the brain we have a, if I can get this to work here. Okay, so in the brain, we have a feedback loop. So we're talking about people that are depressed, they're constipated, they're fatigued, they're cold all the time, they may have issues with body weight, can't lose the weight or easily gain weight. Okay, now in the brain, we have this little sensor called the hypothalamus, which kind of senses the amount of thyroid hormone. So if thyroid hormone is really high, it turns it down, just like a thermostat. If the heat is high, the thermostat kicks off the heat, okay? But if the thyroid hormone is really low, the thermostat or the hypothalamus will kick on and it will tell the pituitary gland to release TSH. TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? Thyroid stimulating hormone goes to the thyroid gland and it tells it to make thyroid hormone. Okay, it stimulates the thyroid hormone production. So to make thyroid hormone, you need 2 iodine plus 2 tyrosine. That equals T4. Okay, T4 is thyroid hormone. Okay, now T4 is about 93% of what the thyroid makes. About 6% of what the thyroid makes is something called T3. Okay, And basically, T3 is the thing, though, that goes to the liver or goes to like skeletal muscle, okay, in different parts of the body, and it gets converted from T4 to T3 to reverse T3 and to something called T3 S and AC. Now we're going to get into that a little bit more, not too much today, okay? But the idea is that T3 is actually what revs up our metabolism and our tissue, okay? So when we have depression and constipation, fatigue, there's certain areas of the body that are not going to be responding well to T3, okay? T4 does some things in the body like blood flow to the intestines, but primarily we're talking about T3 here. Now, T3 goes to the tissue, and the tissue has receptors, okay? And then it docks on those receptors. Now, one of the things about this is that when it's made, it's actually bound to a transport protein, and that transport protein takes it all the way to the tissue, and then once it gets to the tissue, it cleaves off. So now the T3 is actually what docks on the tissue receptor. That's a key thing, okay? And then once it docks on the receptor, then you get energy, basically, okay? And that cell does whatever it's supposed to do. So you can imagine if the brain isn't doing what it's supposed to do, you might get depressed or constipated. If the gut isn't doing what it's supposed to do, you might get constipated. If all of your energy production isn't working, you might get fatigued. And also, like, if you're not making energy, you're not making heat, and you can get really, really cold. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I know I'm going kind of fast, but this is kind of the basics of thyroid hormone patterns or production and use in the body. Okay, now, what are the two biggest things that I took from that class, the three biggest things? The first one is that about 80% or more of thyroid cases are actually autoimmune. Okay, so what that means is that essentially the thyroid gland is working fine, okay, but then you got a white blood cell that comes in and it basically attacks the thyroid gland, okay? Now it can attack this enzyme here that glues iodine and tyrosine together, which is called TPO. Maybe some of you have had labs where they did TPO antibody tests and they were high. That's what they're talking about, okay? Or it can actually attack the basic constituents of thyroid hormone called thyroglobulin, okay? So we'll just put like a little T here, okay? And so now the immune system can attack either one of those targets for Hashimoto's, and that's what this course is primarily covering, or it could attack TSH or thyroid hormone receptors, TSH receptors, which could lead to Graves' disease, okay, which is a very severe type of thyroid autoimmunity. Now, what are the biggest things about this that I want to share with you today? The first thing is that if you break this down, it's like 23 patterns of thyroid disturbance, okay? And so primary hypothyroidism that requires medication for hypothyroidism is just one pattern, okay? The majority of people that have chronic issues have more than one pattern. Okay, so they're going to need somebody to get in there and diagnose these patterns, the physiological pattern, so that they can actually heal. Remember, not only does the thyroid affect these conditions, depression, constipation, fatigue, cold hands and feet, and weight gain, but will determine the rate at which your tissue can heal and recover, okay? So any chronic condition will have a thyroid component. I've never seen one that didn't, okay? And every thyroid condition can lead to one system that is more vulnerable to go offline, okay? So having this dialed in can be a huge part of the recovery process. Now, understanding that the thyroid is actually not the issue in the majority of cases, and that it's the immune system, really kind of makes us wonder, well, do we need to know anything about environmental factors or lifestyle factors that influence the immune function? And aren't we talking about immune system vitality quite a bit right now with everything that's going on? Okay, those same things resilience for the immune system can significantly impact the course of your autoimmune condition, including Hashimoto's, okay? So if we take a look at this a little bit more, the two biggest things that I want to share that's left is that if we have an autoimmunity that's affecting the majority of thyroid cases, and if that autoimmunity is due to TPO, one of the things that I was taught early on about thyroid was that if they have thyroid symptoms, you might want to give iodine. Okay. Now, what iodine does is iodine actually increases the amount of TPO circulating. Okay. The TPO is what we use to glue iodine and tyrosine. It would make sense if you take a bunch of iodine, then you're going to have more production of thyroid hormone, and that production of thyroid hormone could potentially help somebody who's hypothyroid. Okay, the biggest problem with that in the United States is that there's very few people that are actually deficient in iodine. And that reason is because of all the iodized salt. Okay, if you're eating any processed food at all, you're going to be getting enough iodine in your diet. Okay, there's some old testing that I learned way back in the day when I first started in practice. One is called an iodine patch test, where you take iodine and you stick it on your skin. And then depending upon how long it takes to absorb, it tells you if you have an iodine deficiency or not. I've never seen that correlate clinically with an iodine blood test. Okay. And the reality is if you upregulate this enzyme, you could upregulate the autoimmune attack. Okay. So if these guys are like on the hunt for TPO, and we decide to go ahead and go out there and go after TPO with our immune system, then if we increase the amount of TPO, we could actually increase the autoimmune attack. So what's really interesting about that is that a person could do so much worse on iodine. It could make their autoimmunity worse. And the reality of that is that so many people are doing things like gluten-free. They're avoiding foods that are like autoimmune paleo foods, and that totally can be very, very useful. In fact, the first course that I ever learned about lectins was the first thyroid course that Dr. Kharrazian put on. And it was a revolutionary course in its day. It still is. And now what we've understood now is there's another level of the food stuff, which is also part of this course that he's going to be getting into. Okay. He actually wrote a paper, Dr. Kharrazian wrote a paper with Dr. Aristovijdani on how a person can do autoimmune paleo and sadly make their thyroid autoimmunity worse, okay, or their thyroid symptoms worse. So that's going to be covered this weekend as well. But the two things are iodine, not so good for somebody with Hashimoto's, more than likely. And two is that if a person eats a bunch of salt, there's two things that happen. One is this can go up here if it's iodized, okay? And then the second thing is these white blood cells that carry out the autoimmune attack also really dig salt, okay? So, you know, like you've heard that you can put salt in a wound, or you can gargle with salt water to try to kill like a bacteria, okay? Part of the mechanism of that is it upregulates your immune system. Part of it is bacteria don't like it, okay? Part of it is you can upregulate the immune system. Well, if you upregulate the immune system and the immune system is attacking TPO, you can see how that could be a total disaster. Okay, so some of you may have noticed that like when you go out to eat or something, you go to a specific restaurant, even if you're eating lectin free and doing things, for whatever reason, you just don't feel as good when you go to that restaurant. And is that something in the aluminum that the food is being cooked in? Is it the oil? Or is it the amount of sodium in the food that you're consuming? So I wanted to share that with you. If you're depressed, constipated, fatigued, if you're cold all the time, and if you're having difficulty losing weight, and you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, there's a really strong need to look at salt as something that is another factor to consider. Okay, so hopefully that'll make sense to you. The last thing about this course this weekend is, hey, look, if you can't make it this weekend, you can still register and watch it at your own pace. I think one of the things I love about Dr. Kharrazian seminars is the amount of information. And the challenge back in the day was to go there and to like get blasted with a bunch of information and then try to hang on and then be able to use it on Monday morning. And so I always love that challenge. But now what you can do basically is you can log on, you can watch the seminar, and I think you have up to a year to watch it at your own pace. So that's the beauty of it. And again, it's going to be very technical. So if you're a layperson, you're wanting a little more about this, you're going to be getting the cutting edge Hashimoto's information, okay, that doctors are getting. So it might help you get some conversation going with your doctor. And if it's the lifestyle stuff, you may never get that information from your doctor. Okay. They're going to be really focused on other aspects of your care plan. So hopefully it's something that y'all can do. And I'll probably doing some more videos about some stuff I learned over the weekend. I hope this finds you well, and catch you later on. Take care.